Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
State funding has fallen not just behind, but way behind.
Far out of step, even with nearby states.
We're finding good results when we do smaller events.
The push for vaccinations continues.
Nowhere on there does it say national champion. That's what I came here to do.
A blockbuster contract for a Hall of Fame coach.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Morrow. A lot of top news to get to tonight on this edition of SWI. But first, the end of an era in Louisiana. The mask mandate is lifted. But that doesn't mean you can go just anywhere right now without a mask. Hospitals, government buildings, universities, schools, and daycares still require you to wear a face covering.
Local government and private businesses also have a say in if the mandate is relaxed in their area. In New Orleans, Mayor Cantrell has already decided against lifting the mandate. Governor John Bel Edwards says the changes aren't a sign that the pandemic is over, but cases have dropped enough for this to move forward.
If you don't know or you're unsure, use the 2 out of 3 rule in order to slow the spread and make sure that you are as safe as you can be. Make sure your activities meets 2 of the 3 following conditions: outdoors, distanced, or masked. And if you're outdoors and you're distanced, you don't need to wear a mask. But if one of those 2 things isn't present, then, and you want to be safe, you need to wear a mask.
At the governor's news conference Thursday, he talked about his plans for more than $1 billion in relief money filtering into the state. The money is coming in from the White House as part of President Biden's American Rescue Plan.
It's meant to keep Louisiana from drowning under the weight of the pandemic. Right now, the plan's priorities cover unemployment, infrastructure, water and sewers, as well as tourism and Louisiana's ports.
And now other news making headlines across our state. LSU narrowed its search for president to 3 finalists. The 3 are expected to be on campus next week for in-person interviews and include UL System President Dr. Jim Henderson, Dr. Kelvin Drogemeyer, a former science advisor in the Trump administration, and Dr. Bill Tate, provost at the University of South Carolina. The latest census figures show population growth far below the national average. The state's population grew by only 124,000 people between 2010 and 2020. That's an anemic 2.7% compared to a national average of 7.4%. The growth was still enough to keep 6 seats in the U.S. House. The state lost a congressional seat after the last census. A Louisiana black bear that rummaged for food from garbage cans, porches, and too close to people was put down this week in Port Allen. Wildlife and Fisheries says it was a tough decision because of efforts to reestablish the black bear population. A century-old jail in DeRidder called the Gothic Hanging Jail is back open for tours except when it's raining. Beauregard Parish Tourism says the coronavirus pandemic and damage from Hurricanes Laura and Delta caused the old jail to close to visitors. Daytime tours with no rain are open again. Hall of Fame coach and Hammond native Kim Mulkey is LSU's new women's basketball coach. The former Lady Texter star who built Baylor into a powerhouse with 3 national champions told a crowd of a few thousand at the Maravich Assembly Center, "When you grow up, you don't forget where you came from."
I've been at Baylor 21 years of my life. I built that program from the ground up. I should say we built that program from the ground up. Can you believe there's only one institution I would have left for, and they made the commitment, and I'm home. I want you to see those banners behind you right there. Final Four, Final Four, Final Four, Final Four. Nowhere on there does it say national champion. That's what I came here to do. LSU is a very, very prideful institution of higher learning. You know what it feels like to win championships. You know what it means to a community and to a state when you're a winning program. I know what it means. And I can assure you, I didn't just come here to win championships. I came here to make an impact at the right time at an institution that needs something really positive.
Kim Bulkey's contract is 8 years, $23.6 million. Only Coach O will make more at LSU. Also, late Thursday, another lawsuit filed over the deadly capsizing of the lift boat Seacor Power. A Terrebonne Parish family sued Seacor Marine and Talos Energy. It alleges that Talos ordered the boat to head into the Gulf despite severe weather warnings. 8 miles offshore, that boat capsized. Only 6 of the 19 on board were rescued.
As lawmakers finish up week 3 of the legislative session, bills have been killed and advanced. This week, transgender bills and efforts to raise teachers' pay were some of this week's highlights. Here's a list of some of the things you might have missed.
Teacher salaries are back in the forefront this session. Lawmakers are trying to give teachers an $1,000 pay raise next year. This raise is double the amount the governor suggested in his proposal. Originally, Governor Edwards had only a $500 raise for teachers and a $200 raise for support staff. Senator Cleo Field says that he expects the increase to make it into the budget, along with a $500 bump for cafeteria workers and other support staff. A bill that would restrict transgender kids from accessing medical care and counseling has been taken off the table for this session. The plug was pulled on this legislation after hours of rebuttals from opponents. People against the bill say its language is discriminatory and has no place in Louisiana. Though this bill is no longer up for consideration by the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, other bills targeting transgender youth are still awaiting a hearing. Those bills aim to bar transgender kids from participating in girls' sports in schools, while other bills want to restrict access to medical resources necessary for the transitioning process. The governor has already said he will not support any bills barring transgender kids from accessing medical needs or restricting their participation in sports. A concealed weapon permit may become a thing of the past. Senators voted 21-11 to throw out the permit required for someone to carry. If this measure passes, that means anyone 21 and older can have a concealed weapon without a permit, as long as they don't have any violent crime convictions or any other legal issues that would bar you from having a gun. All Democrats except one voted against the bill. The next step is to send it to the House for debate. The governor says he will veto it if it ends up on his desk. More news about marijuana coming out this session. Lawmakers are entertaining the idea of decriminalizing recreational cannabis use. The topic of legalizing it has become more lax in session as some legislators are pushing for access to smokable pot for medical use. But this bill didn't exactly sail through the committee vote. The House Criminal Justice Committee voted 7-5 to send the bill to the House floor for debate. If the bill became a law, it would mean anyone 21 and older could buy marijuana and use it however they like. It would also mean there would be more people allowed to sell and grow the product outside of the medical marijuana program that the state uses currently. As vaccinations are becoming more prevalent, some lawmakers are trying to put measures in place that would stop vaccine passports, or in other words, certificates that show a person has been vaccinated, from becoming a reality. So far, there haven't been any bills requiring anything like this. One bill from Representative Kathy Edmonston would ban the OMV from requiring someone to be vaccinated in order to get a driver's license. It would also ban any type of vaccination records from being put on the license. This ban would cover all immunization records outside of the coronavirus. The House Transportation Committee backed the proposal. It heads to the House for debate. After the 2020 election, people in Louisiana worried the oil and gas industry would be threatened. A bill was drafted that would declare Louisiana a sanctuary state, meaning it will be shielded from any federal laws or regulations that could change or harm the industry. The bill was stalled in a House committee this week as legislators worried about lost revenue and possible lawsuits. Representative Danny McCormick, the rep who proposed the bill, says he'll bring it back up for debate after making a few changes.
Every week, I'll give you a quick summary of everything going on at the Capitol. We'll continue those updates until session ends in June.
Childcare and infrastructure are two of the big topics on the minds of voters and lawmakers this session of the legislature. I talked with Stephen Barnes, director of the Blanco Public Policy Center at UL Lafayette. The center has published 2 detailed briefs. The desire for former Governor Kathleen Blanco was that issues she held dear be researched by the Public Policy Center that bears her name. 2 briefs produced this year are on topics getting a lot of attention from lawmakers.
With these public policy briefs, what we want to be doing at the Blanco Center is kind of doing the homework for the public and doing it for the legislators and the other policymakers. So we've put a lot of research into making sure that we can understand the issue and then draw out from that the high-level summaries that can give readers a quick understanding of the major issues on the topic. Trying to touch on a central issue that we know there's been a lot of talk about, there's some debate about perhaps, and something where there might be some movement towards action in the near future. And so with regard to childcare, one of the things that really stood out over this last year was the role that childcare plays in the economy, and how a lot of that has broken down over the past year. And as we think to getting Louisiana back on track and getting the economy moving again, that this is a really important ingredient to that.
In 2020, more than 125,000 children in the state received early care. The brief on child care and the economy estimates child care breakdowns cost the state $1.3 billion in a normal year. Pandemic breakdowns were far greater.
This starts with working parents who miss days at work, or they have to leave early when their normal child care support network breaks down. Obviously, over time, some families that really struggle to find reliable care may end up with a parent deciding that they just can't afford to work, or they can't make that happen. They have to stay home and take care of that kid. So this is something that can be a disruptive thing for a business, all the way to a much more disruptive thing for specific families where workers are losing income because they're just not able to go in and work. The bottom line on the child care story is that inadequate child care and limitations in our current system are bringing with it a real cost to doing business in the state of Louisiana and a cost to families. And so I think as a state, we need to reassess that. We need to make sure that we're paying for quality and that we're equipping us to be a more competitive state when we look across the country.
Barnes says the solutions for child care are similar to solutions for the state's transportation problems.
On the transportation side of things, one of the things we really wanted to look at closely is, does it really look like this is a state problem? Or is it perhaps our inability to harness federal resources? Is there some other solution to this transportation dilemma that we've been talking about now for years?
The findings put the blame squarely on the state.
As a whole, when we take a look at it, it really just looks like our state spending is not up to par. We're not putting enough of our own dollars into this to expect to get great results.
And if you don't put enough of your state dollars, don't you risk not getting a certain amount of federal dollars that you might get?
A lot of the road programs that we're running in this state are going to be federal funding that requires some state matching. And so certainly we need to make sure we have enough state dollars in order to draw down that federal match. And I've certainly heard some discussion about that. I think when we look across the board over the last couple of years, we've seen the state have to get a little more creative in figuring out how can we make sure we have those state dollars to draw down the federal match, and we have been able to do that. So the fact that we've had to turn to more creative solutions, like bringing in some one-time state money to ensure we had that state match, certainly can raise a little bit of concern. That's not quite a signal yet that we think we're not going to be able to make that match, but that is something we want to keep an eye on. State funding has fallen not just behind, but way behind. So the last time we really adjusted our gas tax was several decades ago, and since that time we've lost more than half of the purchasing power of that gas tax. So by doing nothing, we haven't necessarily maintained a status quo. What's happened is we've fallen far behind in terms of being able to generate the revenues that we need to maintain the infrastructure that all of our residents and that our economy rely on.
Research found the gas tax would need to be increased by more than 25 cents to be on par with the value in 1984. Barnes says virtually every other state has increased their gas tax, while Louisiana simply doesn't invest in infrastructure as do other states.
We are way off the mark when it comes to what we as a state are spending when we compare ourselves to every other state in the country for the most part.
Every other state. So
You
it's
know?
not just like Texas, which, oh, well, Texas is big, they have money, they do all sorts of stuff. What about Mississippi or Alabama?
We looked at some of the national data on the percentage of road area in poor condition. When we do that, we see that Louisiana's percentage of roads in poor condition is actually 9 times larger than what you find in Texas or Alabama. So it's not even close. The reality is that when we look across the country, it's common that we're seeing states making much bigger investments, and they're getting a lot of value out of that. So the good news is we can see that there is a well-established long-term effect on economic growth. So we spend more money on roads and bridges, that's going to support some construction jobs in the near term, but that's also going to position Louisiana for long-term economic growth. And as we looked across the literature, we came away with a broad conclusion that something like a 4-to-1 return on investment is a pretty reasonable benchmark. So the long-term benefits here are pretty large. So while nobody might be excited about new tax revenues or carving out some state tax dollars that we can dedicate towards larger infrastructure projects, the good news is there's a big long-term benefit that comes out of that.
Just as there is a long-term benefit from the public knowing this information to challenge lawmakers.
Really, to make big changes happen, we need to have focus and vision by those lawmakers, as well as the public support and engagement to get people involved in the legislative process.
It almost feels like we could be back to normal in Louisiana with the mask mandate lifted. But before we can do that, more people have to get vaccinated. But it seems that mass vaccination efforts aren't pulling in the patients they intended to. Instead, smaller events are faring much better, and they could be the way of the future.
When the public could get the vaccination without restrictions, the new priority of health officials was to get everyone protected as quickly as possible, using tactics like mass vaccination sites.
In Baton Rouge right now is a very, very large, high-volume FEMA site. In New Orleans, there's a high-volume site operated by the city and by the LCMC hospital system at the convention center, which looks and feels very much like the Baton Rouge site. It's just not operated directly by FEMA. The end of result is very similar, that people can go and get vaccinated really easily.
But these places aren't exactly ideal for the population medical experts are trying to reach. Most of the people that have gotten vaccinated were already motivated to get it. Dr. Cantor says they were most likely high risk or 65 and older. Now that group is mostly vaccinated, the rest of the focus is on younger people and those that aren't really sure the vax route is the one they want to take.
I think there are a couple of reasons why community members have not gotten vaccinated. I think you have the group who believe that they are low risk and really do not see the value in obtaining the vaccine. You have people who are just busy and haven't gotten around to it. You also have people who are risk averse, who are scared of the unknown. And then you have those conspiracy theorists who think that, there's something from the government behind it. And so I think those are groups of our community members who have not become vaccinated.
You might also have people in rural areas who don't have the same access as everyone else.
On one of our weekend vaccination events at Baton Rouge General, I had a patient who came in and she had a sticky note that had 13 to 15 questions on it. And so we went through and took the time to answer all of her questions. And at the end of that, she felt more confident in her reasoning why she was getting the vaccine, how it prevented her from being more likely to be hospitalized or dying if she did indeed contract the virus. And I think more conversations like that need to be had, and that's going to be key to engaging more community members in becoming vaccinated.
The obvious fix for the hesitancy is education and community support. But another thing we may consider is the way we approach vaccination efforts. In New Orleans and Baton Rouge, big vaccine tents didn't attract the crowds they were supposed to.
What we're finding more, in order to reach people that might be a little bit less eager to get vaccinated, not resistant, just have questions, just have been taking a wait and see approach. We're finding good results when we do smaller events, targeted events at a church or in partnership with a community group. Smaller events, smaller numbers, but in a setting that makes people feel comfortable. And that might be where we have to put our energies going forward, because up until now, a lot of the people that got vaccinated were very motivated to do so. Now we need to reach people that aren't adamantly against it, just not super motivated.
For some people, smaller events give more of an opportunity to ask those lingering questions about the vaccine. Seeing an acquaintance or a church member at the vaccination site might ease concerns.
If you're getting vaccinated in your community with healthcare professionals or community members or churches that you have a relationship with, then you probably feel safer and more confident in obtaining the vaccine and knowing that those are the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis and that they truly care about you and your well-being. And that is the right thing to do.
As always, if you're looking for information about vaccines, you can call the Baton Rouge General Hospital or the COVID-19 hotline for help or to set an appointment.
Another lawsuit this week filed against LSU. This one, a class action suit targeting the school's Title IX scandal. This month's Louisiana Public Square focuses on the Title IX issues affecting our state's universities. I spoke with sexual assault survivors, school administrators, and state legislators about correcting Louisiana's Title IX system. Here's some of our conversation. Khalees, a lot of attention's been given to Title IX abuses within the football program and also stories of special treatment given to athletes and coaches. Tell us about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, just to name it, my experience, I felt invalidated, manipulated, gaslighted, victim blamed, and slut shamed.
Andre, having just watched this segment with the survivors, we continue to apologize to those who we have failed and thank them for coming forward. We are currently, I think today or tomorrow, I will sign a policy that makes clear that anyone who, without good cause, who has knowledge of a Title IX violation and does not disclose it will be terminated from LSU.
A lot of the barriers we've seen are probably the most common one, I would say, is, like Elizabeth mentioned, not being able to get out of classes with the person who abused you. And it's something that I think Louisiana as a whole is failing on. So I think, not only does that take action from university administration, but it should be a concern to legislators across Louisiana that this is something they have power to change, and it's a real tangible benefit to survivors.
Something we heard students say time and time again was that they would request to be taken out of a class that their abuser was in, but were not. Right. What is proposed to make sure that is something that happens right away?
Actually, I don't believe that's in any of the legislation as they now stand, but that can certainly be amended into the legislation. We've only just had the first hearing in committee.
I think it is absolutely LSU's responsibility to first create a culture where predators and abusers know they will be held accountable, because right now LSU has sent a very clear message that predators and abusers will be protected at all costs.
Well, we can't achieve our potential as a state without a strong LSU, but LSU is our flagship. And it cannot be the flagship of Louisiana unless it has the trust of the people of Louisiana, primarily the students. And we talked a lot about compliance. We talked a lot about statutory requirements. We can't be limited in our thinking as institutions to what's required of us. It's not just this is what you must do. We need to be thinking about the things we should do.
For the complete show, we will rebroadcast Louisiana Public Square, Title IX in Louisiana, Sunday, May 2nd at 11 a.m. You can also find it online at lpb.org/public square. Tonight, we are proud to announce the 6 high school students being recognized by LPB as this year's Louisiana Young Heroes.
Now in its 26th year, LPB's Young Heroes program celebrates the achievements of students who have inspired those around them and have devoted their time, talents, and energy to making their communities a better place.
This year's Louisiana Young Heroes are Jackson Cantrell of Mandeville, a 12th grader at Mandeville High School, Catherine Lexi Davis of Hammond, 12th grader at Ponchatoula High School, and Ivory Gibson of Baton Rouge, a senior at Northeast High School.
Also, Elliot Gomes from New Orleans, a 9th grader at Benjamin Franklin High School. Hannah Lewis from DeRitter, a 12th grader at Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts. And also Michael Vizinoff from Elizabeth, a 10th grader at Elizabeth High School.
Louisiana Young Heroes program is presented this year with the generous support of AmeriHealth Caritas Louisiana, the U.S. Army, Baton Rouge Recruiting Battalion, Community Coffee, and the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. With additional support from Hotel Indigo and Demco, you'll see stories about each young hero on SWI in the coming weeks. Congratulations to you all. Yeah, big congrats to everyone. And everyone, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB app. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. And I'm Kara St. Cyr. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.